There we go. We have officially started. And there are, oh, guess there's another one here. We go. Randolph Masters is joined from Toronto.
That's
There
trouble.
he is.
Recording.
Good looking lad. Do parts.
You know he's a troublemaker, right?
Yes, you know him well too, don't you? I'm surprised he's not out there sitting with you. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to keep an eye on this. And if anybody would like to use the chat, feel free to do so.
Yes. Place at 2 o'clock.
Actually, I encourage that.
Everybody did prefer.
And well, Randolph, you were here and now you're gone. Yeah. And Ryan was going to be on here tonight. I wonder if he got tied up or he's going to join us later. But it is after the hour that we promised to start. And I do want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I want to welcome Mike Mclean, the Canadian Whisky Ambassador, National Ambassador, representing Canadian Club and Alberta Distillers Limited for Suntory Global Spirits. Now that is a huge title. And along with that probably comes a lot of work, as you were describing earlier, making all those calls all over the country. So I hope your stop in Thunder Bay today is working out quite well for you, and we really appreciate you doing this for us, because when you can Zoom, it doesn't matter where everybody is, or what they're doing, you know, or how they're dressed, right, Randolph? And away we go. I just want to repeat that I'm wearing my tartan, my Canadian tartan, because I think it's rather appropriate to wear a tartan when I'm doing a whiskey tasting. And of course, the Canadian one is the one that fits today. So we are going to let Mike tell us everything that we need to know about Canadian whiskey. Canadian whiskey has really come a long way. You know, I was reading Davin Kirkamo's book, Definitive Guide to Canadian Distillers. This is an awesome book, and if anybody's interested in one of these, I happen to have an extra one. But what I found really impressive is that there's over 200 Canadian distilleries right now as we speak. I think that's a little more, right, Graham, than Scotland has.
Scotland has about 152, I believe.
Right.
We're close to there.
So, you know, there's a lot of very interesting brands coming out right now. And of course, you know, they're all premium brands. They're all brands that have a special story behind them. They may even have a special recipe behind them, but they're all under the Canadian rules of making whiskey, and that can be a little different. And Mike's gonna share that with us and tell us what the differences are with making Canadian whiskey versus Irish whiskey versus Scotch and the whole thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And if you could all just sort of raise your hands and welcome him, that would be great. Mike.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here tonight. If I have not met you in the past, I do look forward to meeting you at a show sometime soon. I've got a very busy schedule, but I'm going to hit as many different shows as I can for this busy coming whiskey season, as we'll call it. As Raymond mentioned, it's a very exciting time for us right now in Canadian whiskey. For a long time, we've kind of sat back. And really, I use this joke all the time, but not everybody will get it. I always say, like, we've been the Rodney Dangerfield of the whiskey world. We just didn't get a lot of respect. And a lot of that is because of a preconceived notion of what Canadian whiskey is all about based on what our parents and our grandparents drank. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that for many, many, many years, we really only produced, some easy, smooth drinking, entry-level expressions that sat on the bottom shelf. And as such, people just took that is all that Canadian whiskey can do. Thankfully, because of our unique production process and some unique rules that we have around whiskey production here in Canada, we are able to do some very creative and very unique and innovative whiskeys now that are all coming out at the super premium and premium levels. And it's my privilege, I'll say, to be able to talk to the brands that we have here from both Canadian Club and Alberta Distillers tonight. So, by a quick show of hands, or in the chat if you'd like, how many people here have had a Ryan Coke or a Ryan Ginger at some point in their life? Anyone? Yes. Now, the question I always ask people is, with that drink, that Ryan Coke, that Ryan Ginger, was it actually a Canadian whiskey or was it an actual pure rye whiskey? Because often people don't understand the difference. Of course, the Canadian whiskey, most Canadian whiskeys, as you know it, they are a majority corn, then with some malted barley and some rye for flavor, much like bourbon producers to the south. The unique difference is, of course, the fact that while bourbon producers will put all of their grains together to form a mash bill where they combine the grains, crush them up, warm water, some yeast, fermentation, distillation, and then aging. In Canada, when we're doing that process, we separate out our grains. So for your typical Canadian whiskey, we will take the corn, we'll process it, we'll mash it, ferment it, distill it, and then age it. Same thing with the malted barley, and then same thing with the rye grain. And at the end of the aging process, we'll blend those components together, but that gives us the flexibility to control how the grain imparts flavor in the final product right up until the end of the aging process. By contrast, we're also going to have some pure rye products here coming out of Alberta Distillers. So I want to be able to make sure I can explain the differences for everything. So, sorry, I've got an alarm going off. I'll be 2 seconds here.
I hope that's not a fire alarm.
Nope, not to worry. Not the fire alarm. The Holiday Inn in Thunder Bay is fine. Just a timer alarm that one of my kids had set on their tablet, and it wasn't going to turn itself off. So I apologize for that. So where were we? Talking about Canadian whiskey versus rye whiskey. So our first whiskey for tonight that we're going to talk about is from Canadian Club. Founded in 1858 by Mr. Hiram Walker, who was actually an American. He was a grain merchant and grocer that lived in Detroit. He was making both some vinegar and also some distillate himself. But what he found was that when he was selling off that distillate to another middleman, they were combining it with inferior products and they were making 5 times as much money. So he decided, you know what? I know what I'm doing. I know how to pick up my quality grain. I know how to distill. I might as well do this myself. But at that time in the 1850s, there was a temperance movement in the Detroit area. And as such, he didn't want to put all of his time and effort and resources into building a distillery only to have it shut down with a prohibition. So as such, he looked across the Detroit River into basically a field and forest of nothingness. And he purchased 7 square miles of land that was all forest and field. There was nothing there. And from there, he decided that he was going to build his empire. So after being able to clear off the trees and plant some crops, he set about building everything up because, of course, if you're going to build a distillery, you need some people. And to get those people there, because you're in the middle of nowhere, you need to build them some houses. And it just basically started his legacy of building up his own community. It became known as Walkerville. When he started in 1858, he even paid them in his own currency because Canada wasn't even a country yet, and he wasn't going to be dealing in US dollars, being the fact that he was actually in Canada. Now, to say that he was successful would be a bit of an understatement, but what I really enjoy talking about him is his rise to a challenge. Whenever he came into some kind of a problem, he turned it around and made an opportunity. The earliest example was living in Detroit, but working across the river. The only way to get across at that time was a ferry service. But what he found is that ferry might operate once or twice a day at very different schedules. So he said, to heck with this, and he bought his own ferry service. So not only was it able to get him back and forth and do what he needed to do, but it became a business opportunity for him as well. Even something so simple as later on, when his town of Walkerville was starting to grow, he was also raising cattle. Now, those cattle, he grew enough cattle that he couldn't get them back across the river into Detroit. And unfortunately, his little community of Walkerville was not connected with the rest of southwestern Ontario. At that time, the rail line ended in Kingsville, which is on the north shore of Lake Erie. So what did he do? Well, he built his own railway. And then he made this railway that went from Walkerville all the way to Kingsville. And then from there, he could get his cattle to market off into the Toronto area. Everything just seemed to become an opportunity for Mr. Hiram Walker. He just kept growing and growing. When it came time, his little community, he paid for a doctor. He paid originally for a teacher that expanded into an entire schoolhouse. He basically paid for the police force as well, and became its own little self-contained community. I was in Windsor on July 4th for his 210th birthday, and they had a new exhibit from the city of Windsor that was launched in the coach house at a place called Williston Manor, which was the home of his son, Edward Walker. And I hadn't fully appreciated just how involved he was with this community, to the point that any type of social service or potentially business was either originated or continued to be run by Hiram Walker and his family. Something from the lumber mills to the dairy farm to the post office and absolutely everything else in between. Of course, things were doing very well for them. In 1894, they built the Canadian Club Brand Heritage Center as their head office. Quick show of hands, anybody been there in the past before it was closed? Well, let's just say we're working on that. We're going to try to get it back open to the public. It might take a year or two, but hopefully we'll be able to host some people in there again. I would love to see everybody down there, because when we do, of course, I'll be able to do tastings and things like that right in the brand center. This building, I'm going to call it my office for lack of a better term. It is absolutely phenomenal. There's so much history in there. It's set right on the Detroit River, right beside the distillery itself. I'm still amazed at how well the building has stood up after more than 130 years. When it comes time to take some people through, I'm very much going to enjoy that. Just a little attention to detail. One example I always like to point out is that all of the offices, the main offices, from his three sons, the master blender, and Hiram's office himself, they all feature a great big fireplace. But the marble used for the fireplace was all sourced from different countries. Now, I really don't have an appreciation for how you would source marble from 5 different countries in 1894 and get it there and be able to craft it into what it looks like now. It just absolutely boggles my mind. Of course, we did have an incredible amount of international connections. By the year 1900, Canadian Club was sold in over 100 countries around the world and had started receiving our royal warrants from them. Queen Victoria was actually our very first royal warrant. Her doctor had prescribed her a whiskey and soda to help with her stomach troubles. And as such, for every single day for the rest of her life, she enjoyed a Canadian Club whiskey and soda to keep her in good health. So, but yeah, over the years, we've been through so many big opportunities, even Prohibition. Now, Prohibition wasn't the best of times for Canadian whiskey as a whole, because previously we had been selling a very large amount of whiskey into the United States. In fact, the bourbon people really haven't liked Canadian whiskey for a long time. Originally, our whiskey was called Hiram's Club Whiskey because it was sold in all of the businessmen clubs in the United States in the Northeast. And when the bourbon producers complained to their government, they changed and they enacted a law that required the country of origin to be listed on the label of a bottle. And that's how we went from being called Hiram's Club Whiskey to simply Canadian Club. course, the rest is history. Going through Prohibition, though, at that point, it was Hiram Walker's grandsons that were running the business, and they were also Americans. So the U.S. government came to them and said, listen, even though your business is based in Canada, what you're doing, if you knowingly export product in the United States, that is illegal, and being American citizens, we can throw you in jail. So they signed a contract or an agreement with the American government that stated they would not knowingly export Canadian Club into the United States. What they did instead is they hired a gentleman by the name of McCoy. I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, the real McCoy. Well, he's the reason that exists. And he was a very big smuggler on the eastern seaboard of the United States who was known for only serving the real deal. He never watered down or replaced the spirits. He always sold the premium brand name products. So in dealing with Mr. McCoy as their dock master, his boats would then load up Canadian cases upon cases of Canadian Club. They would take them down the Detroit River, through Lake Erie, through the Welland Canal, out to Lake Ontario, out the St. Lawrence, and go to a little island off the coast of Newfoundland called Saint Pierre and Miquelon, which is a French colony. And by landing the product on that island, they have then exported it to another country. Of course, from there, Bill McCoy's fleet of fast boats would come up and grab it and then distribute it all across the American seaboard, from Boston to New York, Atlantic City, and everywhere else. But they had exported it to a third country, so they met the requirements of their agreement. As I mentioned, though, Prohibition was very trying times. Unlike before, where we could just, it was open borders and could sell it across the border, we'd have to, the grandsons would have to deal with people like Al Capone, who would come up from Chicago, where he could buy a case of Canadian Club in Windsor for $7, and then he would take it back to Chicago and sell it for $70 a case. So these young men, who were all in their 20s, were not a fan of dealing with these gangsters. They feared for their lives, and as such, they actually sold the distillery at that point. And of course, it's transitioned over the years to different owners. Currently, we are part of Suntory Global Spirits, the third largest spirits company in the world. We have some of the founding families in the 5 major whiskey producing countries around the world, including obviously Ireland with Kilbeggan at 1757, in Bowmore 1779, in Scotland, United States, Jim Beam 1795, of course Canadian Club 1858, and the original Japanese whiskey distillery Yamazaki going back to 1923. So we're really benefiting from this overall umbrella, we'll say, a family of brands, because there's a lot of different innovation and ideas and resources that we have access to. Now, I'm sure everybody's familiar with our Chronicle series that was out several years ago, where we launched the 40-year-old. And at the time, it was the oldest Canadian whiskey ever produced. It was actually, I want to say a mistake, but in 1977, our former master distiller, he had laid down a significant number of barrels of pure corn whiskey. What was unique about that was that at the time, we did a pre-barrel blend, where we would distill the corn, the malted barley, and the rye grain separately, and then blend them together before barrel aging. But for whatever reason, he'd set down these barrels of pure corn, and then unfortunately passed away 2 months later. So it was a significant number of barrels that we weren't just going to dump them and get rid of them, and they held on to them. And by the time we went away from a pre-barrel blend process, that whiskey was far too old to be used in any expressions that we were making at the time. So they just sat there and sat there and sat there. We would regauge them every year just to top them up to minimize the the evaporation. And eventually, my good friend and former co-worker, Tish Harkis, the godmother of Canadian whiskey, who retired, actually Friday would be her 1-year anniversary of retirement. She tried it and she said, you know what, this is absolutely amazing. We should certainly do something with this. And the Canadian Club 40-year-old was born. She had argued to sell it for about $500 a bottle. The powers that be, our bosses, said, no, that's crazy. Nobody's ever sold a bottle of Canadian whiskey for that much. So they came down to $250. And that launch was probably the most chaotic thing I have ever seen across the country. There was lineups, there was fights. I think it took less than a month for the entire allotment of Canadian Club 40 to be sold through. And to this day, it's let's just say it's giving a pretty good return on the secondary market. Now, when we went in to do the 41, the 42, 43, 44, 45 in subsequent years, we weren't just going to age it a little bit longer and charge more money for it. So we actually used that unique 9.09% rule that we have in Canadian whiskey, which allows us to add up to 9.09% of another aged spirit to help enhance things. And with the 41 as an example, we had an aged cognac and an aged sherry. The 42 was an aged malted rye and an aged unmalted rye. 43 was different again. The 44 was different again. And the 45, we went back to the pure 100% corn whiskey. Now, I bring that up because it's actually leading me, believe it or not, to our first whiskey of the night, which is our Canadian Club 15-year-old sherry cask. And at the end of the Chronicles series, we knew we were going to have some time off. So we were looking to do something different and innovative. And over the years, we'd done a couple of different sherry cask finishes. It was actually Tish's personal favorite. And so she lobbied behind doing another version of this. And as a result, this is what we have. This is the first on our invitational series. It is the same recipe as our Canadian Club Classic 12-year-old, but aged out to 15 years. And then we do a secondary aging for up to 18 months in a first fill Oloroso sherry butt. It is exceptional. I'm very happy to say, actually, that the LCBO just did a rebuy of it. So we have more back on shelf right now, which I thought it was done with. I'd actually gone around and bought up as many bottles as I could because I didn't think I was going to see it again. So I'm very happy to see it back on shelf. But this is, again, it's a Canadian whiskey, so majority corn, malted barley and rye, combined together after the 15 years, and then done a secondary aging for up to 18 months in that first fill Oloroso butt. It is exceptionally good. So I'm going to invite you now. I know I don't need to talk you through how to do a proper tasting. So please now enjoy, have a sip, and give me your comments in the chat. I'd love to hear what it is because I'm going to keep talking too. So the second edition was our 18-year-old high proof, which I believe is all gone now in the LCBO. I'm still waiting to hear if they're going to buy another one of that or not, which again was the same recipe as the classic 12-year-old. But aged out to 18 years and then bottled at 58%. And there's actually a little Easter egg that's there with it because it's an 18-year-old at 58. And of course, Canadian Club was founded in 1858. Now, I bring all of that up now because I will let you know, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an insider secret. In the fall of next year, we are going to be coming back with the last bit of the liquid from our Chronicle series, and we will be launching the very first 50-year-old Canadian whiskey. So I can't tell any more details than that. My best guess is that it's going to be probably about $1,000 a bottle, which obviously is very expensive. But at the same time, if you've ever priced out a 50-year-old bottle of whiskey from any other country, you'll know that it starts at a much, much, much higher rate than that. So I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to enjoying that when it comes out. We will also have a special 100th anniversary of the LCBO product that's coming out too, because Canadian Club was actually one of the very first SKUs ever listed in the LCBO back in 1927. So we're doing something special for them for the 100th anniversary. Any comments or like that, or any questions in the chat on our first dram of the night? Any thumbs up? Anything? Thumb up from Raymond there. Excellent.
So, Michael.
Yes.
This 909 rule.
Yes.
What in particular are the list of, if there is a list, or maybe there's only a couple of those spirits that they will blend in with the whiskey? You mentioned cognac, did you?
Yes. So, well, for the Canadian whiskey laws, what it is, actually, you know what? I'm going to back it up because I'll explain how we got there, because I think it's a relevant story for what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And it was early 1900s, I believe, like 1905, 1906, around there. And once again, the bourbon producers were not happy that Canadian whiskey continued to outsell bourbon in the United States. So once again, they petitioned their government for help, and the government did the same thing that they're trying to do right now, which is taxes and tariffs. However, the Canadian distillers, as we're Canadian, we're not just going to roll over and play dead. So they went through the American tax laws and they found a loophole. And that loophole was that if there is a 9.09% American-made component in an imported product, then it was not subject to those taxes and tariffs. So the Canadian whiskey distillers started bulk importing American-made whiskey, adding that 9.09% to their Canadian whiskey to ship it back across the border. And they did that to avoid those price increases due to the taxes and tariffs, which again, as we all know, tariffs just make it more expensive for the end user, not the producing companies, but it is what it is. Thankfully, they didn't need to keep doing that past the late 40s and early 50s when they finally did get a trade agreement in place. But that rule has stayed in place. The rule specifically says that you can add any aged spirit, so a minimum of 2 years old, up to 9.09%, which actually works out to 1 in 11 parts. So I believe it was originally like 1 in 11, and then we've just converted over to a percentage. How that's been used now, a lot of purists, I'll say, look at that rule as a way to make it cheaper or an inferior product. And while that may have been the case originally, because we're putting American whiskey in, and I'm joking, don't worry. But now that rule, at least within our company, we're using it to help enhance and boost the flavor profiles within our whiskeys. So as long as it's a minimum of 2-year aged spirit, you're basically allowed. You can't just put anything in there. It has to be at least 2 years old and a distilled spirit.
And are you continuing to use American-made spirit, or are you now?
They're using everything.
Everything, yeah. Right.
So we don't have Reifel here tonight, but Reifel Rye is a great example because Reifel has 9.09%, where half of it is actually a bourbon, specifically Old Grandad bonded. And then there's 3 types of sherry that are added right in there. So
okay.
It's like I said.
Well, Reifel is our second one.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't bring a bottle in with me. Sorry. I apologize on that. Either way, well, I ruined that story, but it's all good. So yeah, no, it's open. And this is one of those things that allows the whiskey makers here in Canada, whether it's the craft or the big players, to really get creative and innovative and stay within the rules. I was joking with one of my counterparts over in Scotland that, everywhere else in the world has much stricter laws when it comes to production of whiskey, but then much looser laws when it comes to sales. By contrast, here in Canada, we can do a lot of different, very interesting things, but then when it comes to the sale, we're much, much more restricted in how we're able to actually purchase these products. So, Graham, you know what? I'm going to bring up Dark Horse when we get to that next bottle. So yeah, any questions at all on the Canadian Club 15-year-old sherry cask?
Nice. It's nice. It's smooth.
Isn't it now?
It's a good place to start. Absolutely.
Excellent. So I will let you know, like I said, it is back on shelf right now, and I believe the retail is $75, $95, or $99. I apologize. I'm traveling from all the different provinces. I've given up trying to memorize what every bottle is priced at in every province. So, but approximately $75. And in my opinion, it's a phenomenal value. That's something else about Canadian whiskey, is that being domestic, we are always going to be an incredible value for the money that you're investing in that purchase. All right. So I do apologize. I don't have a bottle of Reifel in here. It's out in my truck still, but we'll talk about it anyways. So Reifel is coming from Alberta Distillers Limited in Calgary. Founded in 1946 by Mr. Max Bell and Mr. Frank McMahon. If you've ever been to Calgary and, let's say, went to see a Stampeders game at McMahon Stadium, or gone to see a WHL game at the Max Bell Arena, they were 2 icons of the local business scene, had their business interests in a lot of different things. And back in the 1940s, they had a lot of cattle feedlots as well as investments in oil. They also had access to a lot of rye grains. So as such, they decided, you know what, we're going to build ourselves a distillery. And they had the land. It was southeast of downtown Calgary at the time. But they needed to find somebody who knew how to deal with rye grains in distillation. Because, of course, rye is actually the worst grain to try to distill. It's sticky, it's messy, it can gum things up in a hurry. And they came upon the Reifel family. specifically George H. Reifel. Now, the Reifels were based out of Vancouver, and during Prohibition, we're going to say allegedly, because of course nothing was ever, well, they were never charged for it, but they may or may not have had both a distillery and a brewery, along with a fleet of very fast small boats that they hid in a marshy area outside of downtown Vancouver. And they may or may not have loaded up these boats with a lot of beer and whiskey and taken them down off the coast of California, where they offloaded them and made millions of dollars during American Prohibition. Now, at the end of a Prohibition, they sold off their brewery, they sold off their distillery. In fact, they even donated the land that their boats were hidden in. It's still known as the Reifel Family Bird Sanctuary out in White Rock. And then George H. actually went overseas to Japan to learn different types of distillation over there. And when he came back, he was approached by Max Bell and Frank McMahon and said, listen, we have this opportunity, but we need somebody who has knowledge of working with an unmalted rye grain. And they brought him on board. And of course, the rest is history. Today, Alberta Distillers is the biggest distillery in Western Canada. We produce about 25 million liters a year. They are the biggest producer of 100% rye whiskey in the world today, so much so that 75% of all the rye grains in Canada that are bought for distilling are bought by Alberta Distillers. That means that every other Canadian whiskey brand you can think of, their rye purchases, they all combine in the other 25%. We have 8 different 400-ton grain silos that we use, all prairie-grown grains. We're bringing our water in from the Bow River, from the Bow Glacier source. We have 3 reactors on site that produce a proprietary enzyme that we use to break down that unmalted rye to convert the starches to sugars as needed, obviously, for fermentation. We use both pot and column distillation. We will use 3 different types of barrels with brand new charred American white oak, ex-bourbon, and ex-Canadian whiskey barrels, which are just the new ones we're using a second time. And of course, we have a total of 22 barrel warehouses split between both a rack style where the barrels are held at the ends, much like a bourbon rack house, and then also a pallet style warehouse. Currently, we have about 550,000 barrels in inventory and always working on some fun new things. So Reifel itself was launched in 2023. It is 91% of our pot distilled 100% rye whiskey, almost a full third of it aged in brand new charred American white oak, with the balance being in ex-bourbon barrels. And then we finish off, as I already mentioned, that last 9.09% is equal parts of Old Grandad bonded bourbon, which is a high rye bourbon. It's the same base that is used also for Basil Hayden, for those that know. And then 3 different types of sherry. Now, before you ask, no, I'm not allowed to tell you what the 3 types of sherry are. Our master, the head of our lab, I should say, her name is Maria Palafox. She told me she'd kill me if I ever told anybody, so I'm not allowed to say that. I'm sorry. And for the Alberta Premium Dark Horse question, let's just say Reifel Rye is Dark Horse's older but better schooled cousin. Dark Horse was a similar concept, but with different liquid. They were using both a combination of pot and column distillation. And it wasn't quite aged as long as we're using for Reifel. And that 9.09% had a similar idea, but there was a higher concentration of bourbon with just a little bit of sherry. With Reifel, it's closer to equal parts of the bourbon and the 3 different types of sherry combined. We call it a feast of a whiskey. And when it was launched in 2023, it won Best New Canadian Whiskey of the Year at the Canadian Whiskey Awards. And I have given up trying to keep track of just how many awards it's won since then, because it just keeps racking them up. It is smooth, still at 42% ABV, but just incredibly complex. There's all sorts of different aromas and flavors, which I'm going to invite you now to please crack into and to enjoy. What I really like is the versatility. Whether you're enjoying it neat, whether you're enjoying it in a classic spirit-forward cocktail like an old fashioned or a Manhattan, or literally you just want to make a really good tasting rye and ginger, it works in all of those cases. We're finding right now, everywhere with the exception of obviously Alberta and Saskatchewan, that Reifel has become the go-to replacement for a lot of bourbon consumers, not because it has the same type of flavor profile, but it has a complementary flavor profile that a lot of bourbon drinkers do enjoy. And in fact, in almost all exclusively of our on-premise partners with bars and restaurants have gone there. And across the country, the top 10 share gainer in terms of brand families, 9 of them are families, so there's multiple products involved, but Reifel is by itself, and it's actually number 5 for having picked up the biggest share since the start of removal of American products off the shelf. So please sip, enjoy, savor, and think of the many different ways that you can enjoy our Reifel Rye.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. One of the things that I read in Davin's book, I found quite interesting. As you mentioned, the founders of Alberta Distillers were quite well invested, and they just decided to start a distillery because perhaps they were philanthropists, but they started a distillery so the local farmers had a market.
Yep.
And
Well,
I thought that's a really interesting reason to start a distillery, and really awesome of them.
they were exceptional businessmen. They always looked at different ways to be involved in doing different things. And since they already had those cattle feedlots and they were already dealing with these farmers to try to feed their cattle, it's a nice, it's gone back since the dawn of time when you're distilling. If you can have those two kind of shoulder industries where you're making whiskey and then you're taking the spent grains and you're feeding it to your cattle. In fact, when they built Alberta Distillers, there was 2 rail lines installed in the middle of the distillery. It wasn't for anything we were doing whiskey related at the time when it started. It was to be able to export those cattle when they were fully grown and going off to market elsewhere. So we are using it now today. We do export a lot of whiskey that way. But it again, the planning and the thought process to, again, having no history whatsoever in distillation and just seeing that business opportunity. And of course, we are still dealing for some of the farms that we deal with. We're on our 3rd and 4th generation. Now we do deal with a broker. So gone are the days of a farmer showing up with a pickup truck box full of rye grains. And it's just all double tractor trailers. But those same families are now selling to our brokers who are then bringing it in, and we're going through that. And like I said, it's all prairie grown grains. Incidentally enough, they're actually currently working on what's called the Alberta Whisky Act, and they're going to create a new designation for an Alberta made whiskey. There are 45 distilleries in Alberta, of which Alberta Distillers is the biggest. So if there's 200 in Canada, almost a quarter of them are already in Alberta. And that Alberta Whisky Act, it requires that you're using Alberta grown grain at least 66%, which actually helps us because we're big enough. We're using grain from Alberta as well as Saskatchewan and a little bit out of Manitoba. Obviously within Alberta water source, and then the whole process from milling to mashing to fermentation to distillation to aging to bottling, all taking place in Alberta. And in addition, it still has to meet all of the other requirements to be called a Canadian whiskey. So their goal is to create this new Alberta whiskey designation to help promote the industry within Alberta and beyond. And they're also hoping to create like an Alberta whiskey trail, which I think would be absolutely awesome. Simply because Alberta Distillers, it's a massive facility, but it's like a large industrial plant. And let's just say, if I show up, I have to wear a hard hat, a safety vest, and steel-toed shoes. And I still really have to pay attention because there's probably at least 12 different ways that I could get crushed or killed without knowing what I'm doing there. So we don't have a consumer-facing tour that we can do. And my hopes is, fingers crossed, is that when they do push that through, that we will be able to do something consumer-facing, and I'll be able to do some tours, or at least have a reception area that I can bring people in and let them try some really cool stuff.
So I'm glad you segued into that, because that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
About that Alberta designation, and I'm wondering if other provinces are going to start thinking about doing the same thing.
It'll be interesting. I was actually supposed to be in Calgary 2 weeks ago on the Monday during Stampede because they were doing a kickoff event. So myself, Patrick Sweeney, our managing director for Canada, and Craig Dryberg, who is our general manager of the Alberta Distillers Limited, we were going to be at this event where they had all of the different ministers there from the government. And of course, the Alberta Craft Distillers Association people were there. Unfortunately, I got stuck in the Toronto airport because somebody forgot to turn off the batteries on the plane overnight, and we never made it to it. But yes, the act is going through. Now it's all of the follow through of what's going to happen with it. I don't know how many other provinces are going to do that, simply because there are so many in Alberta. I think the reason there's so many distilleries in Alberta is the fact that they do have those private liquor stores, so it's much easier for them to be able to sell their products. Here in Ontario, obviously you'd have to deal with the LCBO. You're allowed to sell from where you are producing or like making it, but unless you're in like the biggest traffic spot area, you're never going to be able to make that money back. Plus, it's not an easy game to get into. When you're to sell a Canadian whiskey, you have to age it for at least 3 years, but you're paying taxes on those barrels as soon as you put it in the barrel and lay it down to age it. So you need to find some way to keep the lights on and pay your staff until it's ready. And of course, the LCBO will probably no longer purchase any craft gins or any craft vodkas because they've had so many of them go through. So it's really, really tough market to get into. If it were to open up and have private stores, then that certainly makes things a lot easier because you don't have to get through that one person, the category manager for whiskey, to convince them that you got to be able to sell this. You could go from store to store to store and work something out. But I digress. We'll see how things go in the future. But for now, I'm excited to see what comes of the Alberta Whisky Act and how they develop the Alberta Whisky Trail. And hopefully it gives me an opportunity to invite some people to come spend some time at Alberta Distillers.
Right. Graham, I'm interested from a whiskey shop owner's perspective, what your thoughts are on the Alberta Whisky Act.
The person sort of spearheading it is a fellow by the name of Bryce Parsons. I'm sure Mike is familiar with Bryce. And Bryce and I are friends. And we've had lots of really long discussions about this Whiskey Act. I'm not convinced yet. I like the idea of the Alberta Whisky Trail, but the Alberta Whisky Act, honestly, because we're such a-holes here in Alberta, I'm not sure that we should be trumpeting necessarily that the whiskey comes from Alberta, because you could easily turn off as many people as you try and encourage. And this has sort of been the crux of the conversations that Bryce and I have had. If Alberta was a little bit better behaved in Confederation, I would think that it would go a lot better. But honestly, as a born in Edmonton, Albertan, I'm a little embarrassed by the way we behave sometimes here. So I'm not sure that it's all that good an idea. I certainly don't promote it, and I know the first that I remember sort of doing something like this was the good folks putting the Niagara region on their whiskey. Well, the name has escaped me.
40 Creek.
Sorry? 40
Creek.
Yeah, 40 Creek, exactly. And they put Niagara region, and I had sort of the same visceral reaction to them as I'm having it for Alberta. It was, why in Alberta would I care that it came from the Niagara region? It's like, it's Canadian. We're all Canadians here. So I'm sitting on the fence a little bit. That's the best I can say.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Yeah, and your thought.
What I do like about this, though, too, is that it's not requiring them to do anything different than the rest of Canadian-made whiskey. It does affect any, I'll say, second-party people that are buying from somewhere else, say out of province, and then bringing it in and doing a secondary finish and then selling it off like that. But for the actual craft distillers and the bigger ones like ourselves, it's not changing how we have to go about making the whiskey. It's just trying to give it an extra seal on the bottle. And I think that the tourism aspect, I think the Alberta Whisky Act is the first step, and their real push is going to be towards the tourism aspect. But as Graham mentioned, whether or not people really want to go there quite right now, or maybe we're going to wait till after they do their referendum and hopefully realize that they want to stay part of Canada. But yes, I don't live in Calgary. I do represent it. And so I get asked that question a lot when I'm traveling across the country. Specifically, why the hell do you want to do that? And I'm like, not me. I'm just the whiskey guy. Yeah. Any other comments or questions on our Reifel Rye? That one retails at the LCBO for about $50. Okay. What's up next, Raymond?
The Batch 10 Legacy.
Batch 10. Oh, yes. Got that one right here. Now, part of the interesting part of what I get to do, and this was honestly one of the real, I'll say perks, when I was interviewing for the job. I'm not involved with what we're doing for RTD flavors or with the flavored whiskeys, things like that. However, when it comes to planning for innovation with the full strength spirits, that I'm heavily involved with that. I'm looking forward to, having my fingers in play at least for some of the future. None of the stuff that we're coming out now had any influence other than drinking and enjoying it. But the Batch 10 was an interesting one because as far back as 2001, they had a lot of different special projects involved. And what they found was they went through, they tried just some different things, and they actually had some cask left over. And so what they've done here with Batch 10, and it's funny because this has won awards for a 10-year-old whiskey. It is not a 10-year-old whiskey. What it is essentially it's an orphan barrel project with casks that were as old as 2001 to 2011 that were left over from other projects that were then brought together and batched over from a 10-year gap and put out as a one-time specialty release. So this is a very, very unique whiskey coming from Alberta Distillers simply because it is a still pure 100% rye whiskey, but it is a combination of both pot and column stills, all three different types of barrels from both types of rack houses, but from different years. I did actually get the breakdown at one point, much like when they do a Booker's, they break down how many of every type of barrel that goes in there. I've got that as well. I don't find it nearly as relevant, but it is a very, very unique whiskey. We won't be doing this again. We might have something different in the future, but I just found it to be a very cool way. On that note, too, I want to talk to you about who actually made this one, and her name is Maria Palafox. And if you've got Davin DeCurmo's book, not the distilling one, but the other one, he's actually given her an entire page and a picture in there, and she is absolutely phenomenal. She is a self-taught super sensor, started off in our lab at ADL as she now runs the lab, and essentially any new innovation that we have coming from Alberta Distillers will be passing through her, if not created by her. So just an example, we have in the fall coming, I'll let you guys know this too, we have an Alberta Premium 25-year-old coming. And when I got to try it last fall, so we have 4 different liquid streams. We have the pot still that'll either be brand new oak or ex-bourbon from the rack warehouse, or we have the column still, which is ex-bourbon or ex-Canadian whiskey from the pallet. So from those 4 liquid streams, Marie had put together 3 different possible combinations for our Alberta Premium 25-year-old. And when we were tasting one of them, she was like, you know what? I'm picking up this one specific chemical compound. And first of all, I didn't recognize it myself. I like to think I know what I'm doing, but I'm not that good compared to her. And so I just nodded and smiled politely. And she's like, you know what? I think it's about 50. And so again, nodded and smiled politely. And we went about the rest of our work that we were doing. And in the meantime, she'd put it into the chemical analysis. And then when we came back, she was right. She had detected this chemical compound to a concentration of 50 parts per million with just her sense of smell and her sense of taste. So at that point, I sat there and I begged her, please, 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 make sure you keep making our whiskeys for at least the next 10 to 15 years until I retire, because I really, really want to keep doing this. So needless to say, she's kind of our ace in the hole. But the Batch 10 she was involved with. And I can't tell you the rest of the cool stuff that we're working on, but trust me when I say there are some very, very cool things. Well, actually, I guess I can tell you one thing. We do have a single barrel program that will be coming from Alberta Distillers. So with our 4 different liquid streams and our range of ages in barrels, we're going to have a very unique single barrel program where groups or businesses will be able to purchase. We'll find out what type of whiskey they're looking for, either bring them some samples, or if I have a nice space at the distillery by then, bring people in to do a tasting, and then from there they'll be purchase their own barrel of 100% Canadian rye whiskey. So at this time, please crack open your sample of our Alberta Premium Batch 10 Legacy Reserve. Don't get me started on the name either. I don't know why we're using batch all the time, and it gets very confusing. That's something else I'm hoping to clear up in the future. But again, very different when compared to our standard Alberta Premium, even the Alberta Premium 9-year Golden Rye, because of that unique age range and the difference from the casks and the warehouses themselves. It really is. I love to use this one in a blind taste test for people just because it's going to throw them off. And I have yet to have anybody who actually picks out what it is. And of course, the price point is awesome too. I believe here in Ontario, it is $79, which for that range of whiskeys, again, is exceptional. Any questions or comments on the Batch 10 Legacy Reserve?
Well, I like this one.
Do you?
Yeah, I like this very much.
I should also mention this is also at 42% ABV. So, but if you do like this, I do recommend what's on shelf now. That is the last of it, because it was a late 2024 release. So the last of it is just selling through right now. That may or may not have been another thing that I've been doing on my Northern Ontario tours. A lot of these stores have got a few numbers of bottles left that aren't available in Southern Ontario. So I may have a back of my truck filled with all the different products that I've found on my travels.
So, Mike, when you said that you're blending batches, so to speak, right, from different years since 2001, is it something like a Solera cask that you're using, or how are they
Nope.
how are they blending them?
So basically what they're doing is they're taking casks from different years, and they've just taken different amounts of these different casks. So for example, and these aren't exact numbers, so I'm just using this as a reference. Say there were 3 casks left over from 2001, 4 casks from 2002, 1 cask from 2003, and so on and so forth all the way through. They're taking different amounts from those casks and then batching them together to make this whiskey. So it's not a combination, not a question of going from one barrel to another barrel. It's just taking, if we wanted to put an age statement on, I guess at the time it was released, it would have been a 13-year-old, because that would have been the youngest liquid that's in there. But the oldest, like I said, was barreled in 2001. So there's much older. I don't know how they came up with batch 10, other than the fact that it's a 10-year range.
Yeah.
But again, there's some very, very different and unique whiskeys based on the fact that it's both types of distillation, all 3 different types of barrels, and both types of warehouses that they've pulled these barrels from. Literally some orphan barrels that were left over from other projects that we said, you know what, there's some good whiskey in there. Let's put it to use and make something special.
So would that be difficult from a consistency standpoint? When you're choosing barrel here and a barrel there. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
they did it once.
Maybe that's why it's called batch.
Yeah.
Because one batch could be different than the next.
Well, no, they didn't make more than one batch.
Oh, okay.
They did it once. And that was that entire production run. So like I said, when this one's done, it's gone.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I wouldn't even know how to be able to do that consistently. It was a one-time. Maria got to go work with the barrels and then came up with the recipe and made it work. But yeah, going forward, we won't be able to replicate that at all.
All right.
So, okay. Next up, I believe we're on to our rare batch number 1. Is that correct? That is this one right here. Unfortunately, there are not many of these left at all. When you're working with brands and products, again, in terms of innovation, we're always looking at our different opportunities, and you can't do everything at the same time. So with Alberta Distillers, not only do we have some premium releases, such as our Batch 10, we had a slightly higher expression. The 9-year Golden Rye also got launched, but then we're also looking at super premium offerings. So last year, we launched our Rare Batch series, which again, we're going back using that word batch again. And with our Rare Batch number 1, this one right here, it is a 23-year-old pure rye whiskey. So both pot and column still, all 3 types of barrels from both types of warehouses, aged 23 years, and then bottled at 50% ABV. Think of this as Alberta Premium's much, much, much older and stronger brother. So it is those same 4 liquid components, but taken to the extreme in terms of aging. And of course, like I said, bottled at 50%. Now, it's very important to note, and this is going to come in with our last whiskey of the night too. Typically in the barrel maturation process, you put your distillate in the barrel, the liquid soaks into the wood, and the barrel will breathe and interact with the environment. That rate of interaction is dependent upon the temperature, and the higher the temperature, the higher the rate of interaction. And typically in most climates that have a bit of humidity to them, it'll be the alcohol component that starts to evaporate, the angel share. However, in Calgary, being at such a high elevation in a dry climate, it's actually more of the moisture content that will be evaporating. So over time, we're actually losing more of our moisture content because we're putting our liquids in the barrel at 62% ABV off the pot still. And as it goes on, we're losing more of that moisture content because the climate is so dry, and it actually increases the ABV. And as such, we're able to produce some products like the Rare Batch series and our last one, the 10-year-old cask strength, that measure in at a much higher ABV, but in reality, they don't taste that way. This is a great example. I've had 50% ABV whiskeys that I was sure I could use to run my vehicle with. This is certainly not one of them. This, in most people, when I've done a blind test with them, they thought it was somewhere in the low 40s. So I'm going to invite you now to please open your sample of our Alberta Distillers Rare Batch number 1. This was the first. We do have number 2 here today too. I'm very, very happy that we finally got it on shelf. And eventually we will also be doing a number 3 and a number 4. And each of these releases will be something different. If you are able to find a bottle of Alberta Distillers Rare Batch number 1 on shelf still in the LCBO, it'll retail for about $150. So this, to me, is what rye can be when you give it a chance to mature out even longer, and like I said, bottle it in a little bit higher strength.
I just want to add, Mike, that this year it hasn't been that dry here in Alberta.
Oh no?
Oh no, we've set all kinds of records for the amount of rainfall that we had in June and July. It has just been, I mean, I've seen, just driving to work today, I saw 4 people building arcs in their driveway. So it's been wet here.
I was there in June, and my sales rep was commenting that the Bow River through Calgary did not look like it was at the flood stage anymore, and he thought that was a very good thing. And I'm like, why would you even let me come in here if you thought it was going to flood? And he's like, no, we should be good. We're fine. Don't worry. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
water levels are high here.
Yeah. Yeah. What does everyone think of our Alberta Distillers Rare Batch number 1? Actually, maybe Graham, you can tell me, is this still available or on shelf in Alberta as well, or is it sold through?
I believe you can probably find it as a Dusty in a couple of stores, but no, we're working on
Number 2. Yeah.
When did 3 and 4 come out? You know?
Well, 3 is probably going to be in Alberta for the fall of this year, but for the rest of the country, not until early 2027. Nice. So I know Rare Batch 2 was out, I want to say November of 2025, simply because I was at the Whisky Global show in Calgary, and I had somebody joking. He's like, oh, I've had all this before. I'm like, how could you have possibly had this? Like, it's less than 2 weeks old. Between the last whiskey, our cask strength 10-year-old, and the Rare Batch number 2, they were like very, very, very new. And I said, hey, that's where I came up with the line. This is not your parents' whiskey. I realized everybody grew up in Alberta drinking Alberta Premium. That's our starting point, but we do make other things as well. So,
yeah, no, it's delicious. It's. I mean, I like the Batch 10, but the number 2 is super premium delicious too. So
oh yes, I'm looking forward. We're doing that next, and that's actually the one bottle I have that it's actually open. I've been using it as part of my LCBO staff trainings because it's so new here in Ontario. It literally, long story short, the LCBO launched a new back of house online system on April 1st. It was the worst April Fool joke ever. and it made a mess of everything, including all the new product launches. So while this was supposed to come in originally January, then March, and then April, it hit the shelves 2 weeks ago. So I've been including it with my store staff trainings coming all the way up to Northern Ontario, because all the stores are getting like 8 bottles. And so I've resisted the urge to buy those ones. Don't worry. But I'm doing a training to explain to them, like, this is what you've got here. Please go ahead and try it. And then when they actually taste it, they realize, because every store is going to have a couple of whiskey geeks there. And when they try it, they're just like, oh my God, that is phenomenal. And I'm like, yep, absolutely is. So
I agree.
okay. No questions on rare batch number 1. We're going to go on to rare batch number 2. Like I said, this one just hit shelves. Now it is a different product. This is a pot distilled 100% rye whiskey, aged in a combination of both brand new American white oak and ex-bourbon barrels. We go to the 10-year mark, and then we actually crack those barrels, add a little splash of sherry, seal them back up again, aged for another 11 years, so a total of 21 years, and once again bottled at 50% ABV. Now, when I sent this out, I have a group that I use for blind taste tests, and sure, I'll take applications if everybody's interested. But I sent out some sharedrams I asked people, where do you think it's made? What do you think it's made from? What is the alcohol content? And what do you think it's going to sell for? And not a single one of them were even close. A lot of them thought it was a single malt Scotch with a sherry cask finish, probably in the low 40s in terms of ABV. And the lowest guess was around $300 a bottle. Very happy to say that, of course, this is 100% Canadian grown rye, pot distilled, 50% ABV, so stronger than you might think. And of course, still only retails for $150. So if you haven't already, based on us talking it up, please open that sample and enjoy our Alberta Distillers Rare Batch number 2. This will probably be my final whiskey for the night once I get all settled into my hotel room and call it a day. So, and if you do have any questions on this, please let me know.
Well, I'm all about number 2 here over number 1.
Are you?
Yeah.
So what I'd like to say is that based on the size of my portfolio and our company for that matter, we make a different type of whiskey for different types of whiskey drinkers and also different types of whiskey occasions. I'm not here to tell you how to drink or enjoy your whiskey. If you wanted to take something like Rare Batch number 2 and mix it with Diet Coke, let's just say if you're paying for it, I'm going to put the biggest, fakest smile on my face and give you a thumbs up. But if it was my round, I'm going to find something a little bit better suited for your taste. But at the same time, I realize that there are so many different types of people that like different things. And as long as we have different options, again, going back to my staff trainings I'm doing in the LCBO right now, I walk in, I've got 4 items. I've got a can of our Canadian Club Cherry Smash ready to drink in the can. I've got our brand new Canadian Club Blackberry. I have a bottle of Reifel Rye and I have a bottle of Rare Batch. And I'm like, this covers 4 different types of people. We have the non-whiskey drinkers, which will drink the Cherry Smash because it's balanced and refreshing. It's not strong. It's not sweet. I have the wannabe whiskey drinkers who are drinking the Canadian Club Blackberry. They're going to mix it with something, whether it's a complex cocktail or just a basic +1. That's their choice. The Reifel Rye is for the whiskey enthusiast because it's got such a great, diverse profile that they can enjoy it neat in a complex cocktail or just on its own with like a +1. And of course, for the whiskey connoisseur, which is obviously who I'm speaking with tonight, we have something like the Rare Batch. And even then, just like any other whiskey producing country, you've always got different types and different styles. The trick is to find one that works well for you. So whether it's Rare Batch 1 or Rare Batch 2, I'll give you a little nod and wink and say Rare Batch 3 is going to be awesome too, but I can't give you any more details on that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to work with such great liquid and have them all be different too. It's not just hey, well, this one is the same recipe, but it's 3 years older. You know what I mean? Like they're all very different and they're very unique.
No, this one, Mike, I'm enjoying it more with every sip.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what's happening here is that my palate's getting used to the high ABV,
Mm-hmm.
and then, and allowing the whiskey flavor to come in and hit my palate. This is very nice.
I'm glad you like it, but you'll also like it still doesn't come across as a full 50% ABV, does it? It, like I said, it drinks much, much lower and much more approachable than that. And that might be a great thing or it might not be a great thing, depending on how many drams you choose to enjoy.
I'll let you know when my cold gets better.
All right, perfect. Well, on that note, is there any other questions at all on our rare batch number 2? I don't see anything in the chat here. Well, the good news for Raymond is we have something that's going to fix his cold, and that is our last whiskey of the night. Let me bring this in. It's sold through surprisingly quickly. I am waiting to hear because I believe there's another order coming to the LCBO, because if you didn't catch it the first time, I highly recommend it. But this is the latest in our Alberta Premium Cask Strength series. Now, of course, when we first launched this in 2020, it won the controversial best whiskey in the world for that year. And then we've had subsequent releases where essentially the only real difference was the year of release and, of course, the cask strength itself. What we've done is gone away from that, and moving forward, this is our first age statement cask strength, and every other year moving forward, we're going to have another cask strength, but it will always have a unique age statement and or cask finish on it, meaning that every time we do a release, it's going to be very easy to differentiate from one to another moving forward. Now, I did do a blind taste test, again, a vertical blind with all of our cask strengths, and despite the fact that this is the highest ABV, this 10-year-old one is bottled at 67% ABV. It actually came out on top with my group. Again, going back to the fact that this liquid went in the barrel. Actually, let me back that up. The cask strength is the premium portion of Alberta Premium. And by that, I mean it is only the pots distilled. It is only aged in brand new charred American white oak and only then put into our rack style warehouse. So it is, like I said, the premium component of Alberta Premium. Obviously, in this case, aged 10 years. Went in the barrel at 62, came out at 67 because there was obviously 10 drier years than there has been this year. And we lost enough moisture content to evaporation that it raised up the ABV to 67. This one is also to be wary of. I mean, obviously, if you're sitting down to drink a cask strength whiskey, that's a special occasion. That's not a day that ends in Y. But this one's almost scary in that when you're sipping it, it certainly does not come across as its full strength. It is exceptionally flavorful. And let's just say, because I get to be involved now, I'm looking forward to what we're doing with the future cask strength releases as well. So hopefully this will help Raymond's cold, but please open your dram now of our Alberta Premium 10-year-old cask strength. And please let me know if you have any questions or any comments.
So, Michael, this might be a terroir question.
Certainly.
So this Alberta Premium Cask Strength is 100% Prairie Rye.
Yes.
So is there a difference between ryes in the West as opposed to in the East?
I would assume that there is. It would take an interesting experiment to be able to get some Eastern grown rye, for example, to a Western distillery like ADL, and then to be able to process it. Because otherwise, if you were just comparing a Western made rye with an Eastern made rye, the production techniques aren't going to be the same.
Right.
So as an example, going back to those proprietary enzymes that we use, to our knowledge, we are the only distillery in the world that produces our enzymes on site to order. And not being a scientist, it was explained to me is there's a nucleus and then an add-on, and that's what you're going to buy commercially from other sources for those enzymes. Whereas the ones that we produce have that nucleus, add-on. So there's just that much more complexity to it, and as a result, produces something a little bit different, a little bit more unique. So it would be an interesting experiment to try to take some Eastern grown rye grains and ship them out to Alberta to distill with them from there. But I don't know how much of a difference, depending, of course, how long you're going to age it for afterwards. And you'd have to have a control set. For example, if we did cask strength with Western rye, then we'd have to do the same thing for the same amount of time with an Eastern rye. But that might be on my list of things to play around with.
I just found it interesting that they actually make a point of saying that.
Yep. Well, it's, again, being very proud of the fact that we're using some of the same farms and multiple generations for so many years since 1946, that it's a point of pride. I mean, there's some of the farmers that have been dealing with us for so long. They have signage on their farms that say they're a proud supplier of Alberta Distillers Limited. So it is certainly a source of pride, and I mean it lends to that Alberta Whiskey Act, where just they want to showcase the fact that, hey, this is something that is proudly made right here.
Hmm.
Something else I forgot to point out too that I wanted to show. So we have obviously these bottles. We're going to call them retro cool now. They're iconic. Of course, we cannot change that bottle design because we'd have an entire generation of Alberta premium drinkers that would probably revolt and go crazy. But what I did want to point out is the fact that we now actually, all of the premium releases, whether it's the Batch 10, our 9-year Golden Rye, or the Cask Strength, they're all in cork toppers. And that actually came about from Reifel Rye, that it was our first cork top, whereby they purchased new bottling line out of Europe. I still remember it because it got stuck in the port of Montreal, and I was in Montreal working for the Formula One race, and I kept sending pictures to the distillery general manager at the time saying, hey, here's the port of Montreal. I'm sure your sea can's in there somewhere. Do you want me to go find it for you? And he sent back some middle finger emojis. And eventually they got it out to Calgary. They had to put a hole in the wall of the bottling line building, pull out the old bottling line, reinforce the floor, put the new bottling line in, and then they had exactly 2 days to spare before they started running Reifel Rye with that cork topper. So now any of our premium components, or premium whiskeys, I should say, have all got in a slightly redesigned Alberta premium bottle with the cork topper on top. So awesome. So those are our whiskeys. What I'm going to ask right now is in the chat to please do two things for me. One is I'm interested to know which of these 6 whiskeys was your personal preference tonight, if any. And second of all, which was the most interesting or surprising bit of information that you learned? I wish I could play some background music, but please go ahead. Or if you still have any questions or any comments as well, please let me know. I'm very interested to get feedback like that.
Well, I'm going to send mine directly to you, Mike.
Okay, perfect.
So I don't sway any opinions.
All right. Quick question for George. Did I have this in Ottawa at Whiskey Wonderland? I think I might have.
Can't hear you, George.
How about now?
There we go.
Yeah.
I believe we had Rare Batch 1. I don't remember if we had the 10-year or not. I can't remember.
I think I did out in the Igloo. I don't think we had it in the booth itself or in the VIP lounge. I think I had it out in the Igloo.
Yeah, I think you had one bottle, that was it, or something. Yeah, because it wasn't in the class side.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I can double check that right now because I'll just pull up my Instagram and I know I took pictures of it. So Batch 2 or King Club 15, excellent.
We had a lot of rifle. I know that.
Yep. All right, let's see if I can pull this up here. Yeah, that's again, I'm very happy the fact that because my distillery, the one distillery is based in Alberta, that I am able to secure some product from there sooner rather than later, as opposed to waiting till it gets released everywhere in the country. I did have it. I'm just looking at the fireplace mantle from Whiskey Wonderland, and it was Cask Strength 10-year-old, CC 20, and then the CC 15 Sherry Cask, CC 18 High Proof, and Rare Batch number 2.
Yes, because you wanted us to bring the coin. That's what it was.
Yes, that's right.
Which we all forgot.
Yep. Carl says Batch 2, excellent. Number 4 and the 9.09% rule, yes. I appreciate it. Yep, perfect. Anybody else, instead of just commenting on which one you like the best, what else did you find interesting or new to you? I'd be very interested to hear that too.
Well, the 9.09 rule is always interesting. Is there any other country that utilizes that?
Nope, there is
Just
not.
Canada.
It's and again, it's always been viewed among a lot of purists. They look at it as a negative.
Right.
And
Yes.
again, back in the day, yes, it may have been used that way. However, because it is still on the books, there's few things I disagree with when it comes to making Canadian whiskey. The 9.9 is not one of them. I do disagree with the fact that you can call a Canadian whiskey a Canadian rye whiskey, even if there aren't any rye grains in it. I think there should be a little bit better definition there. I also disagree that we're not allowing the countries in the European Union to call their whiskeys a rye whiskey simply because of an agreement they signed in 2003. But other than that, I think for the most part, when distilleries are doing things for the right reasons and looking to be creative and innovative, giving them opportunities to do something different and play around with it, I think is a good thing. So I don't think adding that 9.09% to enhance a product is certainly harming anybody else or taking away from it. It just comes down to your access of resources and of course the ability of whoever is going to be combining those components together to make them taste exceptionally well.
Yeah, it's
I
always interesting in all these stories when you hear the reason for doing such a thing is because the government wants to tax you or the government's upset about something. It's just like
Yeah.
Irish whiskey and unmalted barley
Yep.
and there's so much history in whiskey making process that's influenced by governments. That was a very interesting part of that 909 for me.
Yeah.
I'd like to offer another perspective on that. A lot of the Scotch producers, especially at Whiskey Wonderland, ironically enough, were getting after the Canadian whiskey people about the 909 rule. And a very good friend of mine who owns a distillery out here in the West said to them, at least we're honest about it. And then proceeded to say, I'm sure all the sherry casks that you use, you dump all the sherry out before you fill them with whiskey.
Yeah.
And that shut the Scotch producer up pretty quickly because
Yep.
there's such things as wet casks. And
Yep.
a lot of those Scotch whiskeys don't get that color only sitting there for 7 or 8 years.
Right.
And it's because they've got 20 liters of sherry still sitting in those barrels. So let's pat ourselves a little bit on the back and say, at least we're honest about it.
Yep. We are. And again, it's particularly if you think about the fact that when if they're shipping those casks intact, they leave liquid in there anyways to make sure they don't dry out in transit. And then yes, by default, it's already in there. So no, like I said, I think the more information you can provide about your products, whether everyone agrees with it or not, as long as you're making something that people will enjoy and they understand what's in it, I don't see it as a bad thing at all.
Right.
So it looks like the 9.09% rule was one of the most interesting parts of the night too. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like I said, I will tell you this again. I've told you as much as I can tell you for the sneak preview stuff, but I am very much looking forward to what we have in years to come. There's some very, very cool things, depending, of course, what gets approved of all my different ideas that I have. But it's right now. This is our moment in the sun, and I think there has been a growing interest in different types of Canadian whiskey for many years. And now with everything going on between American products being off shelf and of course the cost of living going up, so imported products by default are just getting that much more expensive. Macallan, no, I'm just kidding. We have so many different options that we can do. And I'm finding the longer that this goes on, I'm getting more and more people who previously might have told me that, they only drink bourbon, they only drink single malt scotch, things like that. They're actually willing to try a Canadian whiskey that is at the premium or super premium level, and I'm able to find something that matches what they like in terms of taste preferences. So I'm very much looking forward to this whiskey season when it comes up. I'm going to try to be in as many places as possible. If I am at a show, look for me. I might have the cowboy hat on. I might not. Depends what I'm pouring. But I'll definitely be doing almost all of the Ontario shows. I don't think I'm at Whisky Global Ottawa simply because I'm going to be out west at the same time. But I will certainly be at Toronto. I'll be doing New Brunswick as well, and of course out to Victoria once again too. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so very much, Mike, for taking the time, especially within your trip to Thunder Bay. I hope you have a good trip back, safe travels, and all of that. This has been great. It's been wonderful to find out more and more about Canadian whiskey all the time, and how how impressive it is. How far it's come as well. I've been stopping by, on our trip to Ottawa there. George and I stopped in at Top Shelf and a few distilleries, a distillery in Perth, and on our way down to Hiram Walker, we went into Wolfhead, and I encourage anybody and everybody in your travels, look for a distillery that's going to be just off the road, and you're going to be passing by, and you're going to be there. You could just turn off for 5 minutes and just check it out and see what's going on there, because as Davin said, we're up over 200 distilleries in Canada, and we are whiskey explorers. So let's get out there and check them out, and enjoy and learn and experience all of them. So this has been a great experience, Mike, for me anyway, and I hope for everybody. I do want to thank Graham Usher for coming on with us. He's our good friend out in Edmonton, and we really appreciate your support, Graham, getting us whiskey into Ontario. And I want to thank everybody who's online here tonight and who will be online or taking in the recording. I hope this turns out to be as enjoyable as it has been for me tonight. So I want to sign off.
Raymond, Carl is just asking if you can unmute him. He says he's got something to.
Okay. For some reason, it won't let me. Can you unmute yourself, Carl? Where's Carl? Where is Carl?
Just try clicking in the bottom left corner.
Yeah, there he is. There he is. It just says ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. And I don't have any other place to. I just have a button that says for me to ask him to unmute. I don't know what's going on here, Carl. I'm so sorry, pal. Is Dawn there with you? Because I think she's on. Oh, what are you showing me? What are you showing me? Show it. What do you got there? Alberta Springs whiskey.
Oh, very cool.
Looks like he's been out west and he's picked up Alberta Springs whiskey. Cool.
What year is that one from? I've got one from 1976 in the wooden box still.
Give me. Use your fingers, Carl. Oh, I don't know if we can see that.
I can't quite read that.
No.
Tag says 81.
81?
81?
Excellent.
Cool.
I will also add too, if anybody needs to get in touch on Instagram, I am at Canadian Club Whiskey Ambassador, or can be contacted by email. I am mike.mclean at beamsuntory.com. And like I said, if you're at a whiskey show, please come by and say hello.
And you will be at Whiskey Wonderland? again?
I most certainly be at Whiskey Wonderland. I'm going to be here in Ontario. I will be at the LCBO Discover Whiskey Show.
Global
what is-
Spirits?
Whiskey Global. I will be there at the Friday night in Toronto.
Mhm.
They're asking me to go to PEI after that. And obviously all of the other big ones too, like New Brunswick. I will also be at Whiskey Global Kelowna. I'll have somebody else at Whiskey Global Ottawa for me. Trying to think where else I am. As mentioned, I'll be in PEI and Montreal. I'll be there at Montreal for the second night of Whiskey Global Montreal. And the
That's quite a
second night of
schedule.
Whiskey Global Calgary. Yes. Oh, I'm not really home for a weekend between October and November. So
Wow. Well, it's been great having you with us.